Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel for another Branded Basics. First, thank you so much for the support I got in episode 1, probably the most successful video on my channel so far. Thanks to you guys. Welcome back for episode 2. In episode 1, we talked about what to do if your opponent doesn't stop your Branded Fusion and just the basic lines of play. Now in episode 2, what if your opponent has something? What if they Handtrap you? How do you play around them? How do you play through them? How do you really maximize your chance of winning if your opponent throws in an interruption? So, we're going to talk about each of the major Handtraps that you're probably going to be seeing in today's meta, and we're going to address them one by one and talk about how Branded can play around or play through them to the best of its ability. And with that, let's go ahead and check them out. I'll just talk through them one by one on how to play around or best play through them. I also cover Contact C and Artifact Lancea after the first 7. So we're going to start with the elephant in the room, which is Ashe. Okay, so if you're watching this video to find out how Branded can play through Ashe, it's not going to happen very easily. Pretty much the problem with Ashe hitting a Branded Fusion is you're fairly limited on making any further fusion plays without Branded Fusion. You're going to have to either have a fusion deployment, Cartesia, branded in white, or a branded in red. Unfortunately, white is kind of dead if Branded Fusion doesn't resolve because you have no Albaz Engrave. Branded in red, kind of same thing. If your fusion doesn't resolve, you probably don't have a Despia Engrave or a Fallen of Albaz Engrave to add back, so Branded in red is dead for the moment. So our best chance is fusion deployment. Hopefully, we've normal summoned Aluber to get to our Branded Fusion, and then we can actually do something. So let's say normal summon Aluber, add Branded Fusion, activate, and then Ashe. Let's see what we can do from here. So the best play that I can really come up with consistently that doesn't require you to have like all of your Branded Fusion targets in hand already, like Albaz and whatever, is to pretty much go for a fusion deployment play here to summon Cartesia. We can now use Cartesia to fuse Aluber and Cartesia away, Grand Guignol, and then we can use that effect to dump a copy of Albion to the grave. And so what this is going to do is let us, in the end phase, set a copy of Branded in red, which is live because we have Aluber in grave. We have Cartesia to add back as well. All of that together means that we can activate on our opponent's turn Branded in red, targeting the Aluber. Aluber comes back. We can use Aluber, Cartesia, and Grand Guignol to summon a copy of Guardian Chimera. And pretty much that's the only interruption that you can make consistently through Branded Fusion getting ashed. If we take a look at the standard extra deck that Branded is playing, all of the cards that are interruptions require a Albaz Fusion. So unless you hard draw Albaz with like fusion deployment and can just continue on, you cannot really get into your interruptions. So pretty much your best bet is Branded in red into Guardian Chimera. I think that's the best route and most reliable one to play through Ashe. Again, there's a reason Ashe is the best hand trap against this deck, is because it pretty much locks you out of most of your extra deck options. There's also like polymerization if you're playing Patchwork Engine, but I'm not playing that in my build. You know, poly will let you maybe get into something more. The next hand trap we're going to talk about is Imperm or Veiler. They're the same. We can play through Imperm using Cartesia. You may be familiar with this play already, but I'll just go through it if you're not. If you go normal summon Aluber and they use Imperm on your Aluber, well then you're pretty much stopped. But fortunately we have a way to play around that, which is to first activate fusion deployment and then go for Cartesia. And that way when you normal summon Aluber and they activate Imperm or Veiler, we can chain Cartesia to fuse away the Aluber, and that way Imperm and Veiler miss their target and Aluber will resolve. Experienced opponent will always Imperm your Aluber, and that's because if you happen to already have Branded Fusion in hand, which, you know, they don't know, but that's a risk, then if they don't Imperm your Aluber, then you will just search a copy of Branded Lost instead. And then once you have Lost, Imperm is pretty much dead for the rest of the turn because, you know, they can't respond on fusion summons, so they won't be able to Imperm your Lubellion or Albion or any of that stuff. So they are pretty much forced to Imperm the Aluber. You can play around it with Cartesia. Now that all assumes we're lucky enough to open the fusion deployment with the Aluber. Okay, say our Aluber gets stopped. Say we cannot protect it with a Cartesia. How can we still search Branded Fusion anyways? So, in our scenario, we've normal summoned Aluber, and our opponent has used Imperm on it, so it's negated. So what can we do about it? How do we search Branded Fusion anyways? Let's work backwards from how we're going to be able to do that. So we pretty much need to, in order to get Branded Fusion to our hand, is dump Branded Fusion and Branded Retribution to the graveyard. There are two ways to do that, and that is through Albion and Saronir. So Saronir, when it goes to grave, can dump one. Albion can send one to the grave to use its effect from the hand or the graveyard. So we either have to dump both or dump Saronir and search Albion. And that will get us this, which will let Retribution add fusion back to hand, even if we are negated on the Aliber. So what are some combinations of cards that can get us there? So the first set of combinations, I suppose, is Fusion Deployment plus any of these four cards will get you into here. Yes, I know I said we didn't have Fusion Deployment to dodge the Imperm, but say we activated like Opening in the draw phase to play around Droll, which I'll talk about later, and then our Aliber is negated in the draw phase. So now we can still follow up to add Branded Fusion back to hand. So if we have Deployment, we can get to Cartesia, which will summon Granguignol with the Aliber and Cartesia, and that will dump Albion or Saronir, and then any of these four cards will get you the other one. So let's talk about them one by one. If we go for Fusion Deployment into Cartesia into Granguignol with the Aliber, then if we had Branded Lost, we would activate Lost first. Granguignol could send the Saronir, which would send one of the two, and then Lost would search the Albion, which would send the other one. So that's one way. If we have Gold Sark, we can Gold Sark away a Mercurier, banish a Mercurier to search an Albion, and then Granguignol would dump the Saronir, and that would again get us Fusion and Retribution in grave. If we have Fusion Deployment and Lubellion, Lubellion will search our Saronir to our hand, and then we can summon a Saronir using like the Aliber, and then bounce or send it with Lubellion to summon Lubellion, and that will get both. Or if we just open Albion directly, we can use Grang to send a Saronir, and then Albion will be able to send the other one. So those are four ways we can get both of these in grave at the same time. Foolish Burial works as well. You can just Foolish one of them, and then Granguignol will send the other one, of course. And now, in the event we do not have Fusion Deployment at all, there are only two combinations that I really thought of that would be useful. So we have either opening Albion and Lubellion directly. That would get the job done because we would be able to send one with Albion. We would be able to dump the Lubellion to search Saronir, and then we would be able to tribute summon the Saronir over the Aliber, assuming we summon the Aliber with opening, and then we would be able to send the Saronir with the Lubellion, and that would dump the other. So that's one way to do it. Or alternatively and similar, we would have Lubellion plus Gold Sarcophagus, and this would also get us there because we would have a Aliber summoned off of opening. We would have Sark to banish Mercurier to search us a copy of Albion. Albion would send like Retribution. Lubellion would go to search a Saronir. Saronir could tribute over Aliber again. Lubellion send the Saronir to search a copy of Branded Fusion. So those are just a few ways to search Branded Fusion if we are stopped on Aliber. So that covers Impermanent Ash. Next one we're going to talk about is Nib. Nib is interesting. It kind of depends on which line you have decided to go into. We know there are three lines from episode 1, three main lines, and that's Albion, Lubellion, and Rimbrum. We'll go through each of these and talk about how they play through Nib. So we'll just start with Lubellion. If you go for the Lubellion line into Mirror Jade, you don't summon 5 times. So Nib will not affect you here. If you go for Albion, alright, so let's talk about the Albion line against Nib. So the Albion line, if you remember, is a normal summon Aliber, add Branded Fusion, activate, send Lubellion and Fallen of Albaz to summon the Albion. Albion effect will banish Aliber and Albaz to summon Lubellion. Lubellion will discard a blank, return Albaz and itself to summon a copy of Mirror Jade, send the Albion to special summon Bystial Lubellion, and this is probably where you're going to get nibbed because a nib will stop you from getting a free copy of Branded Lost. If we get nibbed here, we have a couple options. So first we can just use Mirror Jade, sending something like Brigand here to banish our own Lubellion, and then Mirror Jade will get sent, and we can use Mirror Jade effect to clear the nib in the end phase. When we get to end phase, both our Albion and our Brigand will resolve here, so we'll be able to search a copy of Mercurier, and we'll be able to set a Branded Trap or Branded in red. So Branded in red is pretty dead because we have no Albaz or Despia engrave. But Branded Banishment in this particular line really punishes the Nib play because you can just revive the Mirror Jade next turn. Plus get a Super Poly, and then your Mercourier will be live. Banishment pretty much just negates the entire purpose of Nib, and you're pretty much set to go. If you don't have Banishment, however, Expulsion is kind of dead because you have no Fusion Monster to tribute. Red is dead because you have no targets engrave, and yeah, Retribution is dead because you have no target to send. So pretty much Nib does hurt the Albion line quite a bit. Unless you play Banishment, then Nib does not really hurt you at all. And then the last line playing through Nib, which is the Rinbrum line, Aluber plus a Bystial. So that's our 5th summon. Grand will activate and send, let's just say we send a copy of Garura just for a draw. And then our opponent can nib us here, say that happens, and see how we play through it. So if we get nibbed, all of these go, but we're going to do totally fine. Sarnir will activate, sending Retribution. Rinbrum now we can use to banish itself to summon back Albaz. Albaz can activate, discard a blank to fuse with itself and Nibiru on your opponent's field. So those will go. And that will just go right into Albion. Albion can then summon Mirror Jade by banishing Albaz and probably like the Garura you sent earlier. And now you end on Mirror Jade and Albion. Cartesia will come back to hand. You have Retribution follow-up, Grand Guignol, Engrave effect. So you're pretty set to go. So this line plays through Nib really well. I'm not really sure. I haven't gone through all the like possible spaces further into the line where Nib might be activated, but if they activate later, like after you summon Albion, then you'll get Albion effect in the end phase. So I think you're still going to be fine. So as a quick recap, Nib against the main 3 lines. Lubellion doesn't even summon 5 times. Rinbrum can play through it because you have so much follow-up. Albion gets kind of wrecked unless you're playing a copy of Branded Banishment, in which case you're totally fine. If you're afraid of Nib, avoid the Albion line and go for either Rinbrum if you have it or Lubellion if you don't. Another way you can just negate any monster hand trap in general is through Tri-Brigade Mercourier. If you have a fusion monster that needs Albaz as material on board, and you have Mercourier in hand, Mercourier can negate Nibiru. It pretty much just helps you against any hand traps that are used after you've already fusion summoned. It doesn't really help you when you're starting your plays, like doesn't help you with Ash, it doesn't help you with Imperm or Veiler or any of that, but having lost and searching Mercourier at the start of your play will really let you have the Mercourier to play around the bigger hand traps like Nib or Bystials. The next hand trap we're going to talk about is Droll. Very commonly known play in Branded is to use Branded opening in the draw phase to play around Droll and Lockbird. Let's talk about why that is. So Droll says if a card is added to your hand or you draw, except during the draw phase, you can use Droll. So if we just quick play Branded opening, still in draw phase, to summon a copy of Aluber and then search Branded Fusion, you can continue on your play and they can't Droll you. So that's the first way to play around Droll, very commonly known way. But let's talk about if you don't magically open Branded opening against Droll and see what happens. So let's say we're in the main phase, we normal summon Aluber, search Branded Fusion, and they drop Droll and Lockbird on us. Okay, so let's talk about what our plays are with regards to the main 3 lines of Branded. So Droll pretty much stops you from going into Lubellion line because Lubellion will send Despian Tragedy and you won't be able to use it at all. So this one is pretty much stopped and we don't have to talk about it. Rinbrum, kind of the same thing. If you go for Rinbrum and then you banish the Mercourier, you can't search off the Mercourier banish, so this one's kind of dead as well. But the Albion line is totally free to go. So let's go ahead and play through it. So if we go Branded Fusion, sending Albaz and Lubellion to summon Albion. Albion effect, we can banish the Albaz and Aluber to summon Lubellion. Lubellion discards a blank to put back Albaz in itself to summon Mirror Jade. And then Lubellion can send the Albion and then activate a Branded Lost from the deck. Lubellion does not search, it just activates straight from the deck, so Droll does not affect it. And then in the end phase, Albion's text importantly says, you can add to your hand or set. So because it's or set and not then set, there's never a point where you have to add anything to your hand. So you are allowed to set a branded in red or one of the branded traps straight to your field with no effect from Droll. So as a recap, if you get hit by Droll after your Aliber search in the main phase, then you want to go for the Albion line because it's completely unaffected by Droll, and you're good to go with your normal board. Okay, the next hand trap I want to talk about is Bystials, D.D Crow, all the same stuff. So let's talk about what if your opponent has one, and what should you do. So if you know you're playing the mirror match, and you know they're on like a large Bystial package, let's talk about which of the plays we should do if we activate Branded Fusion. So we have our three main options. Let's start with the worst one. Albion. So Albion says when you use Albion's effect to fusion summon, you have to banish from your graveyard. So if you, for example, go Branded Fusion, sending Albaz and Lubellion, Albion will activate, but if they chain a Bystial on your Fallen of Albaz, then you're pretty much toast because you cannot resolve Albion for anything useful. You're going to be forced to go for like Dragostapelia or something, which will just probably get outed by their board, and it's just not enough. So Albion plays into Bystials super hard, and we're going to want to avoid that if you're playing the mirror pretty much. Lubellion line is good to go. Pretty much the reason why is Lubellion, for its fusion materials, will shuffle back from grave or from banished. So because it doesn't target them before they shuffle back in, if it was to move from the graveyard to the banish pile on the chain, then you could still shuffle it back in to fuse with Lubellion, and Lubellion plays right through Bystials with no problem. So it's much safer to go for Lubellion lines into the branded mirror match than it is for Albion. Rinbrom is interesting. So it kind of depends on when they Bystial and if they know when to do it. So let's play through it a little bit. Assuming your opponent has, say, Magnemite, if you go Branded Fusion to summon your Rinbrom, continue with activating Saronir in hand, targeting Mercurier. So people may be used to chaining Bystials to stop you from summoning, but this does not stop you at all. Let's say your opponent banishes your Mercurier to summon its Magnemite. Mercurier will still activate because it was still banished. It doesn't matter by whose effect. You'll add the Cartesia, and then we can special summon the Cartesia and then activate its effect to fuse, and it will take material from the hand the same as the field. So we can fuse away using the Saronir in our hand that didn't resolve, and we can just continue by using Saronir to dump Retribution anyway. So playing through that doesn't really matter. But let's say our opponent kind of knows a little bit better what they're doing, and say our Saronir resolves. We search Cartesia. This is still in hand. Now if we go ahead and fuse away, make Grang can dump, say, Garura, and then Saronir will dump Retribution. In the event that we have, for example, Albion, let's say we can dump a Branded in white. Now if they Bystial on the Branded in white effect, we're kind of toast because we cannot summon any Mirror Jade or any interruption. And if they just get rid of our Albaz, Rinbrom is dead. So this line is not so great into Bystials if they know what they're doing. If they just chain Bystial to your Bystial, then you're totally fine. But if they wait for the Branded in white, if they wait until you're about to summon Mirror Jade and then they Bystial away, then you're kind of left in a really rough spot with not a lot of interruptions. So as a recap, the safest play into Bystials is definitely Lubellion. Rinbrom can get interrupted if your opponent knows what they're doing. Albion can get interrupted even if they're a pleb and, you know, they just Bystial on the first opportunity. So definitely go for Lubellion if you're fearing Bystials because it plays around them the best. Now, all of that worry about Magnemite being activated in response to your fusion plays is kind of negated if you happen to have Branded Lost access. They can just Bystial away your Albaz. On the Rinbrom line, they can just Bystial away your Albaz before you activate Branded in white, but like when you add it back to your hand, they can just Bystial it then, and then pretty much just stop you from going into Mirror Jade that turn. But if you have Branded Lost, then the whole Albion line is fairly safe because they can't activate it in response to your Albion. and you pretty much are just playing through under Lost the whole time, and you're totally fine. So all of that is kind of different if you have branded Lost, but we're not counting on that opportunity. Next hand trap I'll talk about really quick is Ghost Belle. It kind of goes along with Bystials and how you can play around it. It's fairly hard. All three lines kind of lose to Belle a little bit if they Belle in the right place. There's not a whole lot you can do. Belle is fairly solid. The only exception is if you have branded Lost, Belle is totally dead, so it's unlikely that people would side Belle in against you because branded Lost pretty much just negates the use of the whole card. But yeah, Belle stops Albion from banishing to fusion summon. It stops Lubellion from shuffling back into fusion summon, and then it will stop branded in white at the end of your Rinbrum line to summon the Mirror Jade. So you're pretty much toast against Belle as well, but luckily branded Lost does stop Belle, unlike how it does not stop Ash Blossom. So you do have some kind of protection from Belle. All right, the final hand trap I want to cover is D-Shifter. So I'm imagining this is the most likely way you're going to get shifted. You summon Alibur, search branded fusion, activate branded fusion, and they change shifter. So what do we do from here? Let's once more return to our three possible lines, which are Albion, Rinbrum, and Lubellion. Albion line is totally dead because all of your materials are going to get banished, and therefore you cannot banish anything off of Albion to fusion summon any further. Lubellion line is good to go. So let's say we go ahead and activate fusion, dump Albaz and Tragedy. Tragedy will still activate because it's banished or graveyard, so we can search the Adlib or another Alibur for next turn for follow-up. Lubellion can discard a blank, which goes to banished, and then shuffle it itself and Albaz back in to summon Mirror Jade. Now let's look at the Rinbrum line. In the Rinbrum line, we normal summon Alibur, search fusion, activate fusion, and then get hit with shifter. Now what do we want to go into Rinbrum at all? Let's see. So we can banish Mercurier and Albaz. Mercurier will activate, searching branded Blazing Cartesia, but from here we can't even summon the Cartesia, unfortunately, because we have no Albaz in our graveyard. You know, searching anything else doesn't do much. We can't really search Albion because we can't dump a branded spell to grave. So we're pretty much going to have to deal with this as our end board, which is pretty garbage. So in summary, Rinbrum line is no good either. So of these three lines, if you get hit with shifter, we just go for the Lubellion line because we can make Mirror Jade and get a search. Okay, let's quickly talk about our three plays into Artifact Lancea. So Lancea is another hand trap I want to cover. Lancea kind of hits hard if they play it in the right spot. So one way to just completely play around Lancea is to have a copy of Branded Lost. The reason is if you have Branded Lost up and then you activate Branded Fusion, they are forced to use Lancea right here, because if they don't, say you're going for the Albion line. Now that Albion is summoned and activates its effect, they can no longer respond with Lancea because they're in the time window of where Branded Lost will protect you. So if you have Branded Lost up, they're forced to activate Lancea on Branded Fusion, and then you will be forced to go into the Lubellion line. So you will end with a Mirror Jade on board and a Tragedy search, which is not too bad considering your opponent has now lost a card out of their hand. Branded Lost lets you just avoid any complications. But let's say you don't have Branded Lost, so we're going to start playing and see what happens if we run into Lancea. So pretend we want to go into the Albion line, and if we go into the Albion line, we have already normal summoned Alibur to search our Branded Fusion. We activate our Fusion, dump the Albaz and Lubellion. Here we activate our Albion effect, and then they chain Artifact Lancea. So Albion will not resolve because we cannot banish, and we are stuck with Alibur and Albion on board. We have Bystial Lubellion to send Albion to the graveyard, and then we can activate a copy of Branded Lost. Albion in the end phase to set a live copy of Branded in Red. We're pretty set up well for next turn. We have our copy of Branded in Red. We can go Albaz plus Alibur into Lubellion, and then we'll get a Branded Lost search from a Courier. So we'll have interruptions, and we'll be just fine if we go into the Albion line against Lancea. Now let's say we wanted to go for the Rinbrum line, and our opponent has Lancea and we don't know about it. From here we would activate Bystial Sarnier to try to banish our Mercurier, and we would get hit by Lancea right there. So we're kind of in a tough spot here, but we do have Rinbrum on board, which is pretty solid. When it goes to grave, we'll get the Rinbrum effect to summon back out in Albaz to fusion summon. So we still have an interruption. our opponent is down a card, we have a Saronir in hand as another interruption. We can still use our Saronir to banish Mercurier, get a search, and so forth. So we're not in the worst situation here, but Lancea does hit our Rinbrom line pretty hard compared to the other two. Another hand trap that I think is worth mentioning at least is Contact C. The only way to play around it consistently is by having a copy of Sprin, the Iron Dash Dragon, in your extra deck ready to go. So if we go normal summon Alubur, add our branded fusion to our hand, and our opponent summons Contact C to our field, now the only way to out the Contact C is to use it as fusion material, and we can do that with Sprint. So we can activate branded fusion, dump a copy of Fallen of Albaz, and then send the Contact C as material to summon a copy of Sprint. Now from here, we're a little bit stuck unless we can get Sprint off the field. Well, we can either tribute summon a Bystial if the Alubur came out on branded opening. We could have Blazing Cartesia in hand or fusion deployment. So we can go ahead and special summon the Cartesia because we have Albaz in grave. Use Cartesia's effect to fuse, let's say itself in Sprint, Grand Guignol. Alternatively, we can use Alubur in Sprint to just make a copy of Dragos Depalia, if that's something that's preferred. Grand Guignol can send a copy of Albion to our graveyard. And now we have two effects that we can activate in the end phase. So we'll proceed to end phase, and if we're playing a copy of Springen's Kit in our deck, we can actually summon that with Sprint that went to the graveyard this turn. So we can summon a copy of Springen's Kit, which can search a branded card to our hand. We're gonna search a copy of branded in red. Now we can quick play the branded in red, targeting our Albaz and add it back to our hand. Branded in red can use Albaz and our Grand Guignol, for example, to summon a copy of Lubellion, and then Lubellion can shuffle back the Albaz and Grand Guignol to go into a Mirror Jade. So in the end, we still can get our Mirror Jade out if we get hit with Contact C. We just have to go through this way. It's much easier if you have Kit in your deck because Kit can add your branded in red to continue your fusion plays in the end phase. We'll also get the Albion effect to set a branded trap or a second copy of branded in red if you happen to play two. So that's how you play through Contact C with this deck. I suppose I'll mention the generic hand trap outs, which are Called by the Grave and Crossout Designator. Not going to talk much about those. We do have the Fusion Deployment package searching for Neospatian Aqua Dolphin using Elemental Hero Aqua Neos as a reveal. So that will check your opponent's hand for Ash Blossom before you activate Branded Fusion. So that is a way to play around Ash, and you can play that generally in your side deck, but not usually worth the main deck spot. So that wraps up Branded's matchup into Handtraps. Hope this was helpful. Leave a like, subscribe if you are enjoying the Branded Basics content, and with that, we'll see you guys in the next ones.